Welcome to the PetroPapers podcast. Say that 10 times fast. This is where you get your oil and gas intellectual stimulation by asking the technical questions. I'm Pradhan, and with me here today, I have Yvonne Scherz. Today, we're going to interview Yvonne based on her career trajectory and ask pieces of advice in terms of how others can make technical contributions to the industry. Welcome to the podcast, Yvonne.
Thank you, Yoshi. Appreciate your asking me. And I hope that my advice is of some illumination somewhere to someone, to some young woman somewhere, and perhaps some young men. I mean, I do take credit for some young men being inspired as like, oh man, if she can do it, I could do it too. Yeah.
Well, I was going to get right into it. Yvonne, how'd you get here? Tell us your career path.
Well, it's been a circuitous path. I began my quest in engineering because I wanted to be an astronaut. So I'm one of those that saw the 1969 moon landing, and I just knew that's where I wanted to go. And having an encyclopedia, everybody had encyclopedias back then. When my dad bought ours, I read every single one, page, from front cover to end on everyone. And there was a section on space, and that was like, whoa. And I remember that it talked about the astronauts being engineers. And I thought, that's what I'm going to be too. I'm going to be an engineer. I went to engineering school at Tulane University in New Orleans. It was a good compromise because I got to stay in New Orleans. I was born in Central America, in Honduras, and a young woman just doesn't leave home until she gets married. So I lived in New Orleans, and I went to school at Tulane and got an engineering degree in mechanical engineering because they only offered the four. And it was interesting. I went to an all-girl high school. Let me just say that, all-girl high school. So it allowed me to really concentrate on my studies, and I was one of the top of my class. So it's like there's nothing else to do. So we studied. I studied. And funny is that when women are put together in a situation of a competition, they compete in their field, and it was a fierce competition intellectually at my school. It was Grace King High School, and anybody there knows Grace King. Very, very sharp school. It's a public school in New Orleans, and actually in the suburbs of New Orleans, in Metairie, Louisiana. And it set me up for what I think my success in engineering school and forward, because the young women that I was competing with were all very sharp. And their parents were they were doctors, or they were in some science field. My father was an immigrant here, and he was a skilled laborer. So I didn't have that kind of support where, the science fair comes around and you do a chick, with the little experiments or something, that I didn't have any of that. So it's been learning ever since then, and kind of making my way through and upping the ante little by little as I learned. So as when I was in engineering school, I heard that NASA was recruiting. And so I was like, I went ahead and sent off, and I got this huge package. I filled it out. I'm going to be an astronaut. Then reality hit. I was not a U.S. citizen. I didn't know that. I thought I had become a U.S. citizen through my parents. Apparently, I had aged out of that particular side of becoming a U.S. citizen. With when the parents become a U.S. citizen, they're both U.S. citizens. Then the children automatically become U.S. citizens if they're a certain age. And I had aged out, so I was not a U.S. citizen. So I had to pick up my heart and go on to the next best thing. So Amoco hired me between my junior and senior year, and they only had one job, and I was like, yes, I got the job. I think it was godly intervention, but I got the job. And I learned quite a few things. That's where, when I tell people I was aroused about, I really was aroused about, out in the field doing my thing with my steel toe boots and hard hat and tough. And I think it's important for anyone going into a business to understand what it's like on the manufacturing floor, in the field. You have to understand what the obstacles are in order to be able to ask people to do things. And it helps in the relationship. And it does kind of make the whole process of being an engineer in an office a little bit more real. And when the field finds out that one was aroused about, they have more respect. They know that So that was really an important point. That I got hired by Amoco. Amoco offered me a job. As a matter of fact, I had 9 job offers back when. Oil companies, but also Procter and Gamble offered me a job, and I was pretty much shocked that because I'm a mechanical engineer. What the heck do I know about petroleum engineering except that I was aroused about for one summer? But I went to work again in New Orleans. Mobil offered me that job, and it was because I needed to stay culturally again, needed to stay at home. So those are the constraints. Circuitous is because I've had constraints here and there about family, culture, etc. But I do remember telling my mother when I was 13 years old that I was going to be an astronaut. And I remember her telling me, why don't you set your sights on something that you can actually do? Women aren't supposed to be astronauts. Never mentioned it again to her. I just secretly decided I was going to be an astronaut and went into engineering school. So when one shares a dream and is told no, I think we all have to make a decision as to, is this going to be something that I hold back, or is this going to be something that not so much propel me forward? It's just that I there was no reason for me to argue with my mother. She probably was right at that time. But for me, it was like, well, okay. I've always thought that the rules didn't really apply to me. I think if I've been a man, I would probably have been probably a very boisterous person. but anyway, then I stayed with them for a few years, learned everything I needed to know. But one thing that really bothered me was we were developing Mobile Bay at that time, and I was told that I couldn't go to Mobile Bay because they didn't think that a woman could handle a 30-pound pack. It was, an emergency breathing pack. And if we had an emergency on the rig, they didn't think that a woman would be able to pick up that pack and save herself. Yeah, it was those days. And but then I had a woman on that worked for Mobile at the time, and we worked together briefly before she went on to the Reservoir Group. I was in the it was like production engineering, and that was Cheryl Collarini. And Cheryl just laughed and said, "Yeah, that's the way it is, Yvonne. You just, you know." She said, "I didn't tell him I was pregnant until I was, you know, like 4 or 5 months, because they wouldn't let her go offshore if they had found out." Now, mind you, I would have stopped that, but you know, but Cheryl was so adventurous, and she's just so nonchalant, and it was really great. She hasn't changed a bit. She still, you know, kind of throws everything off her shoulders. It's like, yeah, she's a lot of fun to be with. But yeah, that was it was eye-opening, and I thought, well, what the heck am I doing here? I'm not really going to progress. It was dog eat dog back when, and it still is. I mean, you work for a large company like ExxonMobil, Chevron, which you do. It is very competitive, and so one has to really decide, you know, whether you're going to get into the fray or not. Because if you decide to get into the fray, you got to play to win. And so I decided my heart was in Houston because my future husband was there. So I moved to Houston with another company, excuse me, which was like a mini Mobil Oil. It was the Superior Oil Company. That was, it's like everybody I knew had come over to the Superior Oil Company. And so it's like, that's why I said, you know, it's like a mini Mobil. And then Mobil buys it. That was like, oh God. Okay, so they're gonna send me to purgatory. I just knew that because the vice president of engineering usually took out, if anyone left the company, he would take them out for lunch and say, you know, to say goodbye and to learn more about, well, why are you leaving, etc. He heard I was going to Superior, and that was it. He didn't talk to me, persona non grata. So I was like, whoa, okay, they're going to come over here, they're going to find me persona non grata, and they're going to send me to the middle of nowhere, like Midland, Texas. So I went to work for, I mean, I walked across the parking lot to they weren't competitors, but they had an understanding that they would call each other. So I went to work for Mitchell Oil Company. And at that time, my boss had heard that I had gone to Mitchell because Mitchell had called to ask permission to talk to me. I was horrified. So just when you think you're doing everything undercover, no, it doesn't happen that way. But they hired me, and I worked for them until we had, you know, one of the many downturns in the oil business that we know about. But then that gave me an opportunity to work for a small company. It's called Osika now, Osika Oil and Gas, and it was the owner of that company was one of the production engineers that I had met at Amoco back when.
Whoa.
So you just never know when your connections are going to be not so much important, but when they're going to come to fruition, when they're going to play out. So I worked for them on a part-time basis, and that was fine because in the meantime, I had a child, and I was expecting another child. I needed to work on my own time, and so these were projects. So I learned to work as a consultant and in reservoir engineering, and so that kept my hands in it throughout the times that my children were growing up. I was working with them, and so I didn't want to be to stay at home the whole time. I was very thankful that I had the opportunity to continue doing some work. But then my husband comes home one day and says, honey, guess what? I've been transferred to Indonesia. So I was like, well, okay. I could not work in Indonesia. You have to have a work permit. It's very difficult to get one. So and I was among many, many women doctors and lawyers who couldn't work. And so I just thought, this is a great vacation time. But Vico knew that I was an engineer and asked me to do a little project for them. And I did a project that even now when I talk or when I remember it, it astounds me the depths that I had to go through to make it. It was project engineering because the demand, FICO was a partner with Pradhan, and they had the first LNG plant in the world, the largest, the only LNG plant in the world at that time. And they had to draw down those reservoirs really hard in order to keep their production and their LNG contracts going. So when they do that, what happens is, what happens to when you have a gas, you've got a lot of condensate dropping out. They had so much condensate, they needed to know what to do with it. And that's what they asked me to do. What do we do with their condensate? Is there a market for this condensate? Can we make money out of this condensate? And so I began to, starting with what the condensate chemistry was, and what can we do to upgrade it? And the one thing we could do is put some additives in it and sell it for fuel. Where are we going to sell the fuel? Well, the best market, then I go into, the areas around there. The best markets are inland. The ships can't go in. Well, then we have to have small ships. Well, how big are those ships going to be? Started looking up what ships were capable of that, had the draft to get into those up the rivers and sell this, and who's going to be. It was a marketing study of shipping. I had no idea. I just did it because it needed to be done. And then I thought, wow, if I can do that. And then I did the economics, and apparently I wasn't supposed to do that. One of their guys comes and says, you did the economics for this project. I got my MBA, blah, 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 blah. Where did you get your MBA? And I said, at Tulane University. It's like intimidation. That's the number one thing that a lot of guys get ticked off, and they'll try to intimidate because that I think women have intrinsically a weakness in what they've studied, their subjects, and perhaps we're underestimated, I think, a lot. And the way for someone to come up and show their power is they'll tell you, I've done such and such and such and such a thing. How can you possibly tell me this? And I've had that happen since then. I happen again. And at a meeting where I was asking them, well, what do you use for nodal analysis? And what do you use? And the guy said, nodal analysis, what's that? Because a woman, I'm used to getting teased a lot, especially when I would go offshore and I was the only one there. I was the only woman there. They would tease me a lot about this or that, you're a choo-choo engineer, all kinds of stuff. You just learn, you get a thick skin. You just learn, I didn't know if he was kidding me or if it was true that he didn't know. I just couldn't believe that he wouldn't know. And I just said, well, how do you size your piping? How do you know that your facilities can handle that volume? How do you know that you're drawing down the reservoir? How do you know whether you have skin, downhole? And And so the guy exploded and he said, look, I've been working this field for, 10 years. And you come in here and you're starting to tell me, now this is in front of a lot of people, and you're telling me, about all this stuff, and you don't know nothing. And I just said, well, I may not know your field, but I've done a lot of fields that were worth millions of dollars. And I have to take issue with that. I don't know nothing, because I do know something. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to give you the benefit of my experience. But he thought that I was there to tell him what to do. And he already was like, no woman's going to come in here and tell me that. Once again, I was the woman speaking. I think I was the only one there, the only woman there. So it's like, you just get, yeah. And that was like 2008. Like, oh my God. All right. So you have to develop a thick skin. So how did I end up in that meeting? Well, after I came back from Indonesia, I got hired by a consultancy group, and they wanted me to do a study in Argentina. I spoke Spanish, always learn a second language, really good for you. They wanted me to do a look-see on a field. They wanted to go forward. They wanted to push it along. They wanted us, like, all right, we want concrete steps, no more studies. What do I do first, second, third on this? I looked at all their possibilities, and one of them was CO2 flooding. And I thought, man, this stuff really works. This is amazing. It works. So I decided I had to learn more about that. At the time, I was also working for Total, and they've offered me a position, but it was offshore, deep water offshore. And I had worked for them for a year and a half, and they wanted someone full time. And I said, well, I was about to take it when I was called and got I think it was a recruiter. It was for Kinder Morgan. Now, mind you, my only experience with CO2 flooding is studying it, but the person I went to interview with, he liked my enthusiasm. He said, I can teach people how to, talk about this, talk about that, yet I can have people with a lot of experience. He said, but it takes enthusiasm to move new stuff forward. And you have the energy, he said. So against his better judgment, I think it's a God moment, he hired me. And we are good friends even since. We are actually going to have coffee next week because we stay in touch with each other, because he's such a cool guy. And he told me, he said, I had to convince my boss to hire you. And irony of all ironies, his boss, the VP, has become a good friend as well. So, these people who are bosses and you're afraid of, etc., they're people, and you become, you get close to them after the relationship from the office calms down. Then as people, they can become good friends. So I went in, and because I didn't know what you could and could not do in CO2 flooding, I just proposed some really not unheard of, but different ideas, different ways of doing things. And about that time, I was learning about this stuff from shales and fracking shales, and that it was Mitchell that had originated that. And I'm thinking, dang, Dan Stewart did it. He was the manager of geology when I was at Mitchell, and we would tell each other, if we could ever harness the power to break into that shale, look at all the reserves that are just tied up in there. We talked about it, but that was in the 1990s. We just talked about it, and they went and did it, and I was like shocked. I come along over to I'm at Kinder Morgan, just doing the standard stuff. And by the way, when I came back to the US, I didn't and I got the job as consultant. I was so afraid that I didn't know jack about the industry. I had been away for so long. I started reading SPE papers. That's where my love of SPE papers started. I read every SPE paper that I could get my hands on to learn what were the latest developments, what had been going on, what could I try, and since then, so this was early 2000, I took the park and ride, and it was an hour in, an hour out. I read SPE papers in and out, in and out. This is before iPhones, before phones, actually. And so I continued reading SPE papers. Unfortunately, I save all my SPE papers. You've seen my SPE papers. They're gone once with a color, then second time with a different color highlighter, then a third time with a different color of pen, underlining, circling, making notes, and then 4, 5, 6 times. It just, every time I read it, I see something else that needs to be questioned, highlighted. With Kinder Morgan, I learned a lot about CO2, and I did propose a horizontal well as one of our in one of our patterns, and it was an absolute nope. Nope, we're not going to do that. We don't have the experience to do that. We don't have, which is true. I mean, it was high risk. They didn't have anyone to drill horizontally. And I was just insistent, we're going to have to do this. We're going to have to do this. And then I learned that we were going to be buying another field, and that fell through. And I was so disappointed and thought, all right, when I finish this development, there's no more for me to do. I'm done here. So El Paso, at that time, I had interviewed with them like 2-3 years before and turned down the job because I was happy at Kinder Morgan. And it's like, yeah, this is, so I went ahead and took the job this time because they were doing shale. And this is the beginnings before, like at the cusp when Marcellus was getting all leased up, when Utica. So I was put into this group that was sourcing new shale developments, or that, just the secret where we used passwords, etc., because these were very tight hole kind of purchases. We were buying land, we were buying leases, we were just, going. We had a big budget. We were like rolling. And then Kinder Morgan buys El Paso. And I thought, oh my God, here we go again.
Yeah.
So it was, I thought I was going to stay there until, everything kind of quieted down, shut down and stuff. But that old boss of mine that hired me, he offered me a job with this little company. He said, I'm the COO of this company, and I'd like for you to come and work for me as manager of reservoir engineering. Like, wow, yeah, I'll do it. And the task was relatively straightforward. I had done it before, and I did the whole study, and then I had to present to the board of directors. And I just, unfortunately, my recommendation was we can't do this. It takes a lot of money and we don't have those funds. And it's going to be years before we see the money coming, rolling in. And so that's tough when what you're doing is you're recommending basically the end of your job. Because I said the only way we're going to develop is to go with horizontal wells, and we had drilled 2 short horizontal wells as trials, and they were doing just okay. But the geologist showed that this was a really broken up area, and if we could just pass through those lineaments, then we could actually recover a lot more. And at that point, I think we had like 3% recovery. So we had a huge potential to pick up. But it took money, and we were out of money. Without an investor, without being purchased by someone, we were not going to do that. We just didn't have the funds to drill. And so our company went on the market. And but what that did is it helped me put together a data room. It helped me go to NAPE and make presentations, talk to people, explain to them why this is such a good deal. I talked to bankers. People flew over from Europe, and it's like, you got it, they get it when they interrupt you and they're all excited and they go, and you mean that if I do this, this, and this, and this, I'll get this? And it was like, yeah. It was so much fun. It was the best. It was awesome. And that was really I think part of the fun of being in a situation where it's dire and we need this funds. This is before we decided we were going to sell the company. We were looking for investors, and the banker was representing an insurance company from Europe, and they were like, he got it. But I guess the numbers just didn't make much sense because that was above my pay scale. And it didn't go through. So I went ahead and left the company and became a consultant again. And because of the work I had done there, I went ahead and got a position in an A&D company from the UK. Centrica was looking at buying Haynesville and Marcellus assets. And I got to do a lot of analysis and very quick turnaround, go to a lot of data rooms, and started getting into the financials of just being able to look at certain their cash flow sheets. And I got kind of like the hang of, what are we looking for? What is this? Who's in trouble? Who's going to be in trouble? Who needs? And so we tiered, the companies that were our target. And I remember the first thing I told them was, because we had a deal where we were looking to either buy companies and be a minority holder and let them operate their fields, or buy whole areas altogether and we operate them. And I told them, you have no horizontal shale experience. It's going to be a catastrophe. You just need to be a minority. And I said that over and over again, because I had seen what happens when someone thinks that they can operate. They can operate conventional, but when it comes to unconventional, it's very, very difficult to do that. My boss was a Norwegian, Steiner, and he was the best. I mean, this man, VP of A&D, such a nice, continence about him. Gentle. He just was the best. And once again, we had another turn where the powers that be in the UK said, we are not going to develop they had an LNG train that they were trying to source for, and they said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to concentrate on something else. There was a shift in the UK. So all of this, you know, as I look through and look back, there are shifts in what the when I say the powers that be, the boards, the presidents, the people in charge, there's a shift of where they're going. And one thing I did learn is that I am not privy to every single thing that's going on. And it may be a very big disappointment to me, but it's business. And I hope that they were doing what they thought was best for their company and their shareholders. Still sucks, but it is what it is. And so they closed down, but I'm still very good friends with the geologist that was there. Super guy. And shout out to Jonathan. Jonathan is so smart, really understands the very basics of geology, not afraid to share it with a reservoir engineer so that I could understand what was the drivers. And then it's like, boom, clicked. And so he's working CCSU now, which is, you know, carbon capture and sequestration. And I'm curious about that too, because I could put together my CO2 experience with the carbon sequestration and then my reservoir engineering. So that's a potential. And so it's, you know, when I say circuitous, it's like circumstances dictated, and you have to be able to pivot. If you're going one way and it's not turning out, then you have to pivot. And I started pivoting back when I was in college, and not going to be an astronaut. You know, Apollo 13 came along, that movie, and there's Tom Hanks, you know, with his little finger on the moon, you know, and I cried because I knew the heartbreak he was going through, the heartbreak of that dream not coming true. But you just have to pivot. And that, I think that's the biggest thing about a career in the oil and gas business. And so I did go to work at Southwestern, and I will say that working at Endeavor, where we met, was great, because it enabled me to see Midland Basin and horizontal wells. A lot of that experience kind of carried over to Southwestern. What I would say in those meetings, yeah, but look, you can't disregard, you know, that, oh, we have 450 feet of separation. Look, life will find a way. You can't say that they're not going to be connected. You have to be very careful. Connectivity between two layers is potential there. Air shales, yes, but there, and they told me, oh, no, that's not going to happen. So, of course it happens. Yeah, they just never seen it. But of course, once I started doing monitoring, it happens. So then it became, well, if we are if we're concerned about that, about wells stealing resources, then, you know, what are we going to do about it? And when management refuses to see what you're trying to do and doesn't want to go there. And for me, it became increasingly frustrating that I couldn't do what I thought needed to be done. Then it's just time to move on. And you know, I may not be making as much money right now as a consultant, but golly, it's I'm doing things that are fun for me, and I'm learning new things because I decided, hell, I'm going to learn Power BI, come hell or high water, learn that because I never learned it. Hell, I started working when it was Lotus 123. You probably don't even know what the hell that is.
Nope.
I was telling one of the engineers, it was asking me about Tesla. I did buy a Tesla. I believe in electrical vehicles because they're powered by natural gas. Of course, it's the best clean energy, LNG, natural gas. That's the best power generation stuff that we can get. Electric vehicles. So bought a Tesla, and they have the self-drive deal. And so I was telling them, I was that they just upgraded the software and we're going to go to self-drive. And he goes, well, how does that feel? I said, I let it go for a little while and then I go back to what I'm doing. I said, it's kind of like when Excel came out. I was sure there was going to be a mistake between one cell and the other, so I always double checked every single calculation because I knew those cells were going to break somewhere along the way. I never trusted them. And he responded, wow, I wasn't even alive when Excel came out. I said, well, next time, let me tell you about the dinosaurs that I saw when I was growing up.
Funny.
But it was true though, I've been through the ups and the downs and seen the oil industry go from writing a paper for SPE was heralded and got you promotions, and cooperation between companies was just a big deal, where we had round table discussions about a problem, and we actually cooperated. We listened to each other. We listened to our service companies. We were all striving for the better of the industry, all the way forward to now, where I wrote 4 papers with you. And from then on, I was told, do not write any more papers, forbidden to write any more papers. I went to the next company and forbidden not only to write papers, forbidden to go to workshops, forbidden to go to places where I would discuss what was going on, where we would share what was going on. And that's not good. It's not good for the industry. And I know they're deep down, they probably mean well, because they're thinking that they're guarding the company, and everything turns on a word lately when it comes to pricing of commodities or pricing of in the market. But I think there's got to be a better way. I think it's a shame that we are unable to share with each other. Our industry really cannot go forward without us sharing information. We could do so much more for the nation if we were allowed to collaborate and come up with solutions that would get rid of the carbons and get rid of emissions. We would be years ahead, but we are stifling that innovativeness from our companies, or the companies keep it as a secret. And but they can only, it's like they cannot grow without new blood coming in and infusing new ideas and challenging their ideas. It just doesn't work. You keep on one great new idea, but you don't let that grow. You just keep going over and over, and you cannot grow on that same idea. It has to have innovation and growth, so that it becomes better and better and better. And we all know how difficult it is to make that old dog learn a new trick. It just everyone's protective of their territory. You get you don't want to think differently. You made your star on this thing, so you're going to hold on to that idea, and you don't want anybody to challenge that idea, because that's how you made your name. So it is important to be able to bring new people who challenge ideas. And even the companies that say, we have an open area of challenge. We open communications. We welcome open communications. No, that doesn't happen. They just say that. It makes them feel good to say that. But nah. The reason is because that's not in their best interest. They got there the old way, and they want to stay there or get higher. And so new ways are not the way. I think that's the things that stifle innovation in our industry. Is we have people who think the same way and don't want to ever change. And so you and I know that when one speaks out, we may get a little pushback or a big pushback. So, but that's the way it's been since I was started in the industry. And you notice that the way I dressed, and the way I dressed in every job, jacket always, and a dress with a jacket. And one person asked me, why do you dress that way? Are you trying to show off or something? And I said, since I started work, people have always mistaken me for the secretary. So I dress with a jacket or suit so that they won't mistake me for the secretary. And if I have no makeup on and my hair pulled back, they're going to mistake me for the lady that does the cleaning, the janitor. So that's why I dress like the way I dress, because perceptions are I can't raise that person back. I can't. He was raised by his culture, whatever it was, and he has expectations. I can't go back and raise him or raise his culture, or you raise his culture. So I conform to his expectations. And it's a shame, but that's the way it is. I mean, that's the way it is. It's you can't change someone's nature, but you can adapt to it. And then once you have communication going on, then you can let your hair down. Like, you can find me dancing in the hallways, doing stupid stuff, which I do, put my iPods in, and I'll do walking like an Egyptian, down the hallway. Because that's the other thing. The job should be a lot of fun. I am there 12 hours every day. I better be having some fun. And the only people that are around are my coworkers. They better be fun too.
Well, thank you so much, Yvonne, for your story. I mean, I've been lucky to be a part of it, just meeting you and writing papers with you and getting a lot of advice from you. And you've been a mentor. I call you a godmother in many ways.
Yeah.
So I really do look at you very highly. So
Well, thank you. Thank you, Yoshi. I I'm very proud of what you have accomplished and are accomplishing. I'm always rooting for you. And you're the next generation that's come along. And I want to encourage women to be who they are, not be afraid of pausing to have a child. That's just part of life.
Yeah.
Going back to work, uh, it's difficult when you have children at home. Heck yeah, it's difficult. I couldn't even understand how anybody could be pregnant and going to work, but it does happen. And so you just whatever comes, you just have to do it. And uh, I think that you're one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. So it was really great to see that you love the challenge of a problem and would think about stuff. And it's like, and that's what made working with you so much fun, was that, well, what do you think about this? And then you come up with an opinion, or and you weren't trying to impress or not impress. It was just like, well, this is, what do you think? And yeah, because that's what collaboration should be. No offense to anyone, no defensive, it's just like, let's throw it up, see what happens. But that's what makes it fun. And of course, you being so involved with SPE made it even more fun, and made me realize that, hey, I need to go around these guys more. So yes, thank you for inviting me. And I hope that others might gain some insight, and to keep on going, because it's important. It's important.
well, folks, that is all we have today in interviewing Yvonne and her story, as well as the piece of advice that she gave. I'll be sure to put down her publications in the description box in the podcast, in Apple Podcast, and on the YouTube channel. This is Yogashri Pradhan, and we are signing off.